Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm very happy to be talking with author Kat Ashmore, who is a digital creator behind Kat Can Cook, and she has a brand new cookbook out, Big Bites, and it's on the bestseller list in America and Canada. Kat, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, just reading Big Bites, I realized what a timely book it is, and it's such an important book. I think looking at it as somebody who's had different levels of family, different sizes of people to feed, different diets and everything, different time commitments. This book, I think, is really timely, and I think it's probably on the bestseller list for a reason because of that. Can you talk about your philosophy behind Big Bites and why you wrote it?
Certainly. My philosophy around Big Bites and approaching eating and cooking in general is looking at healthier food, eating more nourishing, nutrient-dense food with a different mind frame than has been prevalent in the past. So one of abundance, food that is very flavor forward. And I think what this does is it not only helps people to start really enjoying what they're making and what they're eating, but it allows them, hopefully, to be able to start just making one meal for everyone to enjoy. Because as you said, there are people with different dietary preferences. And I heard from so many people, I want to get healthier, but my husband won't touch these vegetables, or my son only likes these certain foods. So looking at healthier eating from a perspective of joyful, flavor forward food that just happens to be good for you. I think that is where the mass appeal comes in. And it's a big time saver and stress saver for a lot of home cooks, I hope.
Now, you had some experience on TikTok, and I want to know how that influenced your approach to Big Bites.
My experience on TikTok, that was really what I started leaning into in 2020 when I launched my brand. And I think that one of the benefits to creating so consistently on TikTok is that really was a very personal platform. And I led with a very personal approach. My content, even now, is probably even more so very personality forward. And so that human connection, the storytelling piece has been very profound in my growth in being able to connect with people, because I think ultimately we're in an age now where people want to feel like they are connecting with a human, and it's somebody that understands what they're going through, someone that they feel like they can trust. So that really gave me a great approach to creating food in a different way that wasn't so highly produced, but felt intimate. And sometimes, I think it does feel like I'm FaceTiming my friends with some of my videos, and that really works for me, and it works for a lot of people.
Can you talk a little bit about what the recipe development must have been like in this book for the cookbook, and what kind of challenges you had, or how was it kind of special for you to create these recipes for the book?
One of the biggest challenges I had was simply editing down what recipes I was going to include, because I've waited quite a while to write a cookbook. I having worked for Martha Stewart and gone to culinary school prior to that, I have had a few opportunities to write a cookbook in the past, and it just didn't feel like the right time. It's really out of sheer appreciation and admiration for the cookbook space and all of the cookbook writers and chefs and home cooks and authors that have gone before me, that I didn't want to write a book just to write a book. I wanted to write one if I felt like I was adding to the conversation, or even better, changing the conversation. And if I couldn't identify how I was going to do that, I didn't want to write one. So at this point, it became very clear to me, especially with the launch of one of my most popular series, probably my most popular series, the Hungry Lady Salad series. It became very clear to me that this was the time that people had a hunger for this type of food. They wanted to think about eating healthier and getting healthier from a different mind frame, one that wasn't about diet and deprivation. And it felt like this was the space for me to really dive into at this point. So when I started creating recipes, I had so many recipes that I've been not necessarily saving, but felt very cookbook worthy. So really just editing down, making sure that I had a good, diverse selection of different types of foods, but ultimately stuff that felt familiar enough that people wouldn't be intimidated.
I think what I liked about, just as somebody who uses the cookbook to kind of cook for my son and I really liked the fact that you made salads non-boring, and I liked the fact that you had a lot of unique flavor combinations in there. Can you talk about that a little bit and what you thought about you were going to put into the book when you were creating it?
The Hungry Lady salads are, I think part of the appeal there is that they are these big, abundant salads. And I'm always talking about building flavor. So we are looking at each recipe really as I look at a recipe like a story where there's a cast of characters and each character brings out different things in the other characters. And so you've got the yin and the yang, you have the salty, the sweet, the crunchy, the umami, the creamy, and all of that together just works to create a really complex, interesting story. And I think that during the process, I looked at certain recipes. The meatloaf is a great example. The ultimate meatloaf with caramelized onions and horseradish, which is one of the most popular recipes that people have been making out of the Sunday suppers section. Taking something like meatloaf, which everyone loves a great meatloaf. Sometimes meatloaf gets a bad rap, right? Like mystery
Yeah,
meatloaf from the cafeteria.
yeah.
So we're going to take something that has mass appeal, that is hearty, that lots of people like it when it's done right. And we're just going to elevate it in a unique way. So I took a classic combination of beef and horseradish, right? We know that a great horseradish sauce goes with a roast beef. Why not take that horseradish, put it into a beef meatloaf, and then to offset some of that spiciness, cut back a little bit on the fat, we're going to add in some jammy, sweet caramelized onions. And the layers of flavor there are really lovely. And it ends up, you really end up with this meatloaf that is company worthy, that you would be proud to serve at a dinner party, but is comforting enough for a Sunday night, and it's easy enough for a busy Tuesday night. So I want these recipes to be everyday sorts of recipes that are also entertaining worthy.
Yeah, I mean, I made the meatloaf for my son and I really have to say,
Mm.
I think that the horseradish is a genius move there, and the caramelized onions, I pretty much that'll be the only meatloaf I'll ever make again. And you really take it from
Ah,
something that's mundane to something that like is a real winner that the family can really love.
that is that is the ultimate, that is the ultimate praise. So thank you for that. I really I am hoping to be able to replace so many different recipes with just one great recipe that people feel like they can rely on.
You got it there. I mean, so many things too. I mean, so many of the salads are really just winners that I think I could see myself making again and again and again. So there's some real gold here, I think, for anybody that is the person in the family that makes the weekday meals and stuff. I think that you got a lot of good stuff here. And I want to talk about too the weekday wonders and the weekend showstoppers. How did your approach to catering to different cooking needs and priorities affect these recipes?
I wanted to approach this book looking at what are the, what does someone's life look like on a regular basis? So whether, whether it's a Tuesday night, they have to get something on the table fast, or a Sunday when they have a bit more time, I wanted it to be really clear with these chapters which place in the book they needed to go to find a solution to fit their challenge rather than necessarily spanning it out over the more traditional, chicken, beef, pork, vegetables, that kind of thing. So that it was just very, very simple. The bar was really low for people to be able to crack open the book and say, this is the fast recipe section. This is where I need to look.
I love the adaptability of it. I'm a librarian, so my schedule's all over the map, and sometimes I get home at 6:30. Sometimes I get home at 7 or 8. It just depends. And your book is perfect for my lifestyle because it has all these different recipes I can utilize. Some are pretty quick; you can put things together well, or you could do some prep work. And it really, I think, speaks to people that have a varied schedule like mine. So I want to ask too, many of your recipes seem gluten-free. How do you balance catering to dietary restrictions when satisfying a broad audience?
Most of my recipes are gluten-free in the book. I would say probably 90% of them are.
Oh,
And
nice.
most of them are just naturally gluten-free. So you'll find that outside of the 3-year gluten-free bread, which is the most complex recipe in the book, you're going to see some ingredients that maybe you do have to source. A lot of the recipes are almost accidentally gluten-free because we're focusing on so many nutrient dense foods in the realm of seasonal produce, legumes. We've got lots of chickpeas and beans and different kinds of grains and potatoes. And so just by way of that, there isn't a ton of gluten in the book. With that said, I know there are many people, myself included, that don't operate with a completely off limits mind frame when it comes to eating. I sort of
Yeah,
do like an 80-20 thing. I would say I'm going to have
yeah.
great pizza. I'm going to have a great croissant. I just know that on a regular basis, I feel a bit better when I'm practicing some moderation with that, with dairy, gluten, sugar, that kind of stuff. But I certainly have it. So I really wanted to offer recipes that, again, you could make for everyone in your family. And if it's Christmas, if it's Thanksgiving, you don't feel like I have to make a separate dish for this person and a separate dish for this person, because that can be really stressful.
Do you have any I know that everybody kind of has an interesting time with recipe development and trying out things. Do you have any anecdotes or stories about the time of the test period of some of the recipes?
Yes. Uh, Mentioning my 3-year gluten-free bread. So the reason that the 3-year gluten-free bread is called 3-year gluten-free bread is because it took me 3 years to develop that recipe. Hundreds of tests. And my recipe process is really, I find the great challenge and the most amount of time that I spend is on editing down the recipe. I was just saying to my husband the other night, because I'm now working on book 2, gratefully, that it is a lot harder to make a nailed recipe that is short and simple than it is to make a nailed recipe that is a complex one. So I am often saying, okay, I have mastered this recipe. It's incredible. Now, how simple can I make it? Do we really need 2 bowls? Does this really need to be chilled in the fridge? Less dishes, less ingredients, less steps. So that is really where I am spending a lot of my time when I'm making these recipes. But the 3-year gluten-free bread, I I wanted a bread that tasted and felt texturally just as good as a regular, loaf of homemade bread, but happened to be gluten-free. I also wanted one, the big challenge was I wanted one that you could wake up on a Sunday morning, bake it, prep it, have it rise, bake it, and have it for dinner that night. So that's where I spent a lot of time. But by the end, my husband was so funny because I'd say, what about the crust on this one? I feel like, and he was like, finally, like, I don't know. It tastes the same to me. I've had this so many times. I mean, and I was like, all right, fair enough. Cause I'm a little obsessive. And I think that
Yeah.
most good cooks are a little bit obsessive.
Oh yeah, that's totally identifiable. I love that. Now you you're a viral sensation on TikTok. What's been the biggest change in your life, or the most surprising thing, or rewarding thing, even, to finding success there?
Hmm. I think the most surprising and rewarding piece is helping people in a way that I never intended to. So a lot of the messages that I get and things that people will tell me on my book tour or speaking events, I often hear that I have helped them heal their relationship with food. I hear from a lot of women who have had, pretty bumpy histories when it comes to dieting, body image, restriction, binging, those types of challenges, which I think is very pervasive. And I really didn't intend to be so helpful in that way. So to hear that is incredibly rewarding. And it's something that I certainly don't take lightly.
I want to also ask you as well. You have a lot of infectious enthusiasm in your TikTok videos. Was that a challenge for you to translate into the written word?
Hmm. I won't say that it was a challenge. I think that what served me very well is the fact that I have writing experience, having written television scripts before and written product descriptions on the retail level. That has served me very well because I am a storyteller at heart. So to be able to be back in the written world and to be able to tell these stories on paper in a cookbook was really, really enjoyable for me, and why I didn't want to hire a ghostwriter, why I wanted to do it all myself. And something that a lot of people tell me is that they feel like I am in their kitchen with them when they're with this cookbook. They can hear me saying these words. I mean, it's very much my personality is infused into all of this. And I'm very grateful to my editors and my publisher that gave me that creative license.
I Reading the book, to me, it's no surprise. I expected this to be a bestseller. How did you feel when you
Mm,
first saw the news that it was a bestseller? How did that feel for you?
thank you for that. I, you know, I felt very grateful. It felt surreal. Um, I think it was confirmation for me that my patience paid off, in the sense that I waited until the right time to launch a cookbook. I believe that you have one chance to make a first impression. So waiting until now, when I was really clear on what my message was, and I was really clear what the need was for home cooks, especially for tired, stressed out parents, waiting until now and making my message crystal clear, honing in on problem solving recipes. That's really what I'm trying to do, is to help solve people's problems. It was confirmation for me that my patience paid off, which felt very, very good.
Now, you said you're already writing the second book, which I think is thrilling. Any kind of hints as to what it's going to be about?
So I'm now contracted for book 2 and 3, which is
Wow.
very exciting.
Yeah.
And we actually contracted those before the book even came out because the pre-orders were so strong, which was such a thrill. What I can say is that the Big Bites philosophy is going to continue. So my goal is for people to have an entire shelf of Big Bites cookbooks within their kitchen. Really, this philosophy feels timeless to me. And I'm really going to be looking for the next book. I'm going to be looking at getting a little bit more granular on recipes that are cooked in a certain amount of time. Now, the prep time is tricky. And oftentimes people will say, why aren't prep times included? Or it would be helpful to know how long this is going to take me to prepare. But you and I both know that how long it takes me to cut an onion is different from how long it takes someone else to cut an onion. So that's
Yes.
why you often don't see prep times.
Yeah.
But I really want to hone in on getting recipes that are made, can be cooked under a certain amount of time.
Do you have any tips for anybody or advice for aspiring home cooks or someone looking to build a community around food?
My biggest piece of advice, and I was just talking about this on Instagram a couple of days ago, actually, because some people have asked me about this with the growth that I've had, especially recently. I think that number one is identifying what your zone of genius is. So niching down to what is the uniqueness that only you can provide, because people have a very, very short attention span, and they are not going to take the time to figure out if they should follow you or if they should start paying attention to your work. You need to make it very clear to them how you are going to make their life better in one sentence, whether it's from your profile and your bio, which is really important, but also within the pieces of content itself, and treating each piece of content as a standalone piece of content. Because in order to grow your audience, you need to be bringing in new viewers to your work. So each piece of content really needs to be able to stand on its own. A lot of these people that are potential new followers to you don't know anything about you. So don't assume that they do. Start each piece of content with a hook that lets them know why they need to keep watching the video and what it is that you have to provide.
Last question I wanted to ask you was, I know you probably receive a lot of emails and letters from your fans. Was there anyone that you got, or more than one, that you want to talk about that kind of touched you?
Yes, when I was on my book tour, and this is all related to what I was speaking about prior to some of the feedback from women, but when I was on my book tour, I met a woman who said that her nurse practitioner had recommended me to her. She has struggled with eating issues and dieting and the yo-yo cycle. And she had tears in her eyes and, said how this is the first time in her life she's felt freedom around food. And of course, I cried as well. Her mother cried. It was a big cry fest. But I get messages pretty regularly from women that tell me, that they just went through a breakup, and instead of raiding their cabinet, they made this recipe and they felt really comforted by it. It is not a small thing. I will also say that I received a message from someone in New Zealand who she said her father is 62 years old and went on his annual fishing trip with his buddies the previous weekend and brought one of my Hungry Lady salads to share with everyone. And so that really, to me, was so gratifying because, picturing these burly men in New Zealand on this fishing trip, all enjoying a Hungry Lady salad, is really a testament to the fact that these are not skimpy recipes. These are really hearty recipes that are going to appeal to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I'll attest to that because my son and I are big guys. Like, I know you probably can't see from the camera, but I'm pretty tall and big, and my son's a bit bigger than me, and we love the Hungry Lady salads. So they're not
Awesome.
like little
No.
tiny salads. They're fulfilling, satisfying salads. I think anybody would
Yes,
love
lots
these.
of protein, lots of fiber, and lots of good stuff going on. I mean, my husband, same thing. I'm not going to make these. It's not going to be a piece of iceberg and a cherry tomato and call it a
No,
day. Let's put it that
no, no,
way.
no, no, no. So, Kat, I want to thank you for being on the program. I really love getting a chance to talk to you. We want to let people know that we have links to purchase Big Bites in the bio. It's all it's going to be at all better bookstores and, of course, libraries as well. Kat, thank you for being on the program. I really loved getting a chance to talk to you. Best luck about your book, but I think you don't need it. It's doing pretty well.
I loved every minute. Thanks so much for having me.
That was my conversation with best-selling author Kat Ashmore. Her new cookbook, Big Bites, is out. You can buy it at all better bookstores, and you can go to links online to purchase it through major retailers. We also have links to her digital platform, Kat Can Cook, as well as her website. Check that out, and I'm sure you'll be happy to get the book. I really enjoyed it, and I know you're going to like it too. If you create meals for your family every week, this book is really invaluable, especially if you're trying to get healthy. And if you want to cut down on gluten, it also has a lot of great recipes where you won't even know that you're missing it. Tune in next week. We'll have a new guest next week, and I hope that I'll see you all back here to listen to me talk with a chef or a cookbook writer. Until then, I'll see you at the library.